Hey, hello, and welcome to episode 18 of the Living Tantra podcast. Today, I am really happy to be here with a good friend of mine and an astrologer that I deeply respect, and also an inner tantrika, Andrea Michelle Haeckel, formerly known as Kennedy. So Andrea, in 2012, Venus's visible passing between Earth and the Sun ignited her soul circuitry by awakening her devotion to remembering herself through marrying sky and earth in her body. She made her astrology teaching debut at the second Sky Astrology Conference in 2018 and was most recently a lunar guide for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle in 2022. Andrea is one of the featured astrologers on Astrology Hub's newly launched flagship reading platform, Astrologer Connect. She offers astrology workshops, courses, and mentorship in service to revitalizing the sacred in the ordinary and supports her clients to live courageously from their empowered, soul-steeped self. And she is absolutely earnest and sincere in living what she talks, walking her talk. So I'm really excited to be here with her today. The topic is welcoming our initiations for the freedom of new choices. So Tantra is fueled by polarity, the alchemy or transformation that is possible through Tantra is formed by the spin or the opposing forces that create or generate fuel through polarity. And so, Andrea, I want to ask you, how are the masculine and feminine polarities first represented in astrology? Astrology being the recognition of the cosmos as informing our direct experience of ourselves, of our world, and how through your wisdom and feeling sense, how is this presenting right now?
Awesome. Well, astrology as the language to describe who and what we are and are becoming and always ever were is this engaged pulse of masculine and feminine, represented in the chart the way I see it by Mars specifically as the masculine and Venus as the representation of the feminine in their purest essence, you could say. That everything in the chart has a masculine and feminine valence. But Venus representing the qualities of the feminine, which are the magnetizing, the desire to move back, to come back into source, the desire to feel, to know oneself tactily, sensorially, to embrace and welcome, to beautify, to appreciate beauty, and the essence of grace. These are some, by no means all, of the feminine qualities, right? And the masculine, and those are represented in astrology by our Venus and some of the other asteroids and goddesses that are facets of her, which I'll get to in a little bit. And Mars being the masculine, which is what seeks to go out, to move out from source, to differentiate, to explore, to engage and act upon in order to know itself more viscerally, engaged and participatory with life. So it can be our aggression, it is our desire to make happen, to ignite, but it can also be the ways in which we maintain separation. I didn't speak to the feminine qualities that are more more shadow, like grasping or contorting or controlling. These are all facets, of course, of the feminine as well. But each of them in their purity is, in essence, the feminine is moving, coming back to source, and the masculine moving out, right? Which is the essence of Tantra, is that movement and the dynamic of it, right? So again, those two planets are the corollaries in the astrological chart. Now, I also wanted to just take a step back and share about what is astrology and why I practice it, or why am I interested in it. So it's the tracking and the mapping of timing is one way of looking at it, and cycles, the understanding and the appreciation that there is an ebb and flow to everything, that there is movement, there's nothing static, and there's nothing that's constantly moving in one direction, right? But it's also, the natal chart specifically indicates our very unique and precious wiring for how the light that is us is here to manifest and glow and form and be shared and receive the light and love of others. And that's what really, really turns me on, literally. And the evolutionary model is especially poignant for that, because it recognizes this ebb and flow of between personality, self-identity, and self-essence or soul, and the two coming together in a tantric fashion. Always a little bit of this, a little bit of that, coming together in what is ultimately very, very human, which is discovering our own pace within it. So that takes us back to the timing of things, right? So did I answer your question fully, Catherine?
You more than answered my question. Yeah, and I'm reminded of how confirming astrology is, both for our individuality and also for the unique ways that we light up synergistically with others.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying being here with you and not just hearing your wisdom, but feeling it in my body as you speak from your own very deeply embodied experience of these outer presences and how they are living within us simultaneously.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because it's easy to forget that what we see out there, what we talk about in astrology, and especially when it comes to transits, it's so much more easier to dissociate the planets as something outside of us, acting on us, rather than a reference or a mirror for what is actually potentiated within us. So that's the beauty, and that it's like the exquisiteness of the human experience is, that's part of the Tantra too, is the recognition of the inner and outer. And when we're available to recognize that whatever is happening outside has some measure of reflection within us, where we don't want to see that, where we're available to see that, where we make things too personal, where we objectify too much, and that delicate balance is equally in astrology as it is in any other aspect of a tantric way of living. We can apply it in any way possible. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, keep going.
So I'm going to attempt to provide a little bit of a dynamic of what's happening now and what's shifting coming for us, without using too much astrologies, but just kind of getting the gist of it. So one of the major things that's happening next year is there's a shift in what is called the lunar nodes. And the lunar nodes are precisely what you would imagine. They're based on the moon. And not to get too astrologically technically or geeky technology, or astrologically geeky, is the nodes are the points where the orbit of the moon intersects with the apparent orbit of the sun. But here's another thing that's so interesting. It's the apparent orbit of the sun. It's actually the orbit of the earth. So another way in which we can tie in the node of the sun and the moon, or the moon's orbit and the sun's orbit, we are not separate from it. It is actually the union of, within us, of the sun and moon, two of the tantric planets in addition to Mars and Venus. So the movement of the nodes, which is happening collectively for all of us, from Scorpio South Node, Taurus North Node, to Libra South Node and Aries North Node is huge. And this is part of this polarity dynamic that's happening. So to give a brief description, the South Node energies are generally where we need to let go, where we're being asked to transmute and expel what is no longer necessary in order to make room for something new, which is indicated by the North Node. But the trick is, sometimes in order to do that, we need to first risk going toward what's new to initiate the spark, to then do the transformative work of the South Node. So there's no doing it one way or the other. However we are inwardly valenced is the best way for us to go about it. Sometimes it's going deeper into our darkness or what is known first to initiate something new. For others, it could be, my blind spots are too blind to me. I need to just venture into something I don't know, which will then activate more of a clarity, more of an awakening or an opening to the shadow, if we're willing to do it that way, right? If we're consciously participating. And that's another thing that I forgot to mention in earlier on about what astrology is for me, and our natal charts and the transits and progressions that occur throughout our life, or these are all, if we see them as initiations rather than obstacles or life against us, it really fosters an inner orientation, right? It's like the more we choose, even though it might take a number of times to choose this as an initiation, I don't have to like it. I don't have to like it at all. But the ownership of orienting to the initiation, it sets a whole new, it makes room for a whole new paradigm.
Yeah, it's empowering because we're actually including our life force in what's happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because that's evolution requires initiations. We can't move from one state to another, from one energy flow into another, unless we go through this. And we've forgotten that, I think, collectively. We're instant gratification and we want what we want now. And
yeah, and also including our life force or choosing our initiation is the difference between an evolution and repeating a trauma.
mm-hmm.
Which is where we check out or we leave and react to life happening to us. Yeah, yeah.
Precisely. So there's this movement. So just in general, with this axis that we're in now collectively of Taurus and Scorpio is, I mean, there's so much, but to be as precise as possible, the dynamic flow of the energies of Scorpio and Taurus, because they're polarity signs, they are tantric in nature. Every polarity is tantric in nature, but especially Taurus and Scorpio, which are known as the it's known as the tantric axis, because Scorpio is our sexuality or eroticism. Taurus is our sensual axis. And each one has within its center the other. So again, the beauty and the precision of working in a tantric way is if we can recognize we are too valenced in one direction, we move in the other to help balance us out. And this axis, and especially the dynamics of the planets that have been meeting and everything, the whole movement of this axis throughout the sign is releasing control, discovering where we've manipulated, where we have lost ourselves in another, where we've relied too much on energetic experiences or overwhelm, which really takes us out of our experience. It can feel really juicy and it can feel the intensity, which Scorpio is, can feel really good and it can feel like a lot's happening. I know this myself so well, but it's really just a smoke and mirrors game. So the beauty of Scorpio, and part of its clarifying process, is process of transparency, becoming transparent to what we do, because Scorpio is also related to the shadow, right? And the shadow is everything in us, our suppressed life force, as you said. It's the eroticism that is life itself, that we relegate to either just sex or a peak experience, but it's really it's the pervasive energy of life itself, the dynamism of life itself. So moving toward the North Node in Taurus, especially with the Awakener planet in the sign of Taurus for some time, it's awakening to, again, this simplification. Taurus wants simple. It is sultry. It is here. It is earth. It doesn't require a lot. The beauty of Taurus, especially in a North Node function, is to discover the fullness and richness and pleasure of our experience unencumbered, just as it is, without having to contort the way that Scorpio can, especially in the South Node aspect, which is what we know, the North Node being what's new and to explore. So it helps to balance out whatever we feel we need to be hiding because it's not enough, or a sense of lack or deficiency, or I don't have what I want. So risking staying, the stability of Taurus, to stay and experience what is actually here.
Yeah.
Love. And exactly, I am love, ruled by Venus. Exactly. Scorpio ruled by Mars. This dynamic pulsing and tension of the feminine planet Venus and the masculine planet Mars as the rulers of this axis. This dynamic of stable, using the feminine, in this case, the North Node in Taurus, to allow the masculine to self-arise and show up, infused by, emboldened by, informed and nurtured by the feminine. Mm-hmm. So this is the ruler, Mars's rulership in Scorpio is as a fixed sign. It is where we learn to use the energy of Mars to choose to stay in the dark, in what we can't see, in our experiences that are uncomfortable, in the places where we normally hide from ourselves. Mm-hmm. Energy that is normally directed outward, as in Aries, which is another Mars ruled sign, which is exhausted collectively with Chiron there anyway, not to get too much into astrology, but how can we just stay and let the beauty and the grace of the Taurus energy that is at the heart of Scorpio grace us with the richness and fullness and the stabilizing force of the feminine to accentuate and illuminate and love the depths and the darkness. Sometimes the depths and the darkness is not what we think it is, right? It's never what we tell ourselves it is. So that is the current nodal axis for us collectively. And next year in July, the nodes that move backwards, by the way, as opposed to everything else in the chart that moves the other direction, which again shows this tension of we can't really move forward unless we honor and acknowledge the past. And we can't get stuck in the past too long before the evolutionary impulse it's like evolution and involution are married. They're wedded together. We can't exclude one for the other, right? So the nodes are going to shift into North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra. And this is interesting because the same nodal rulers are at play, Venus and Mars, but now they're switching. Mars is the ruler of Aries and the North Node, and what we're exploring, we're going toward, and Venus, the ruler of the South Node in Libra, which is what we're looking to release more. So again, there's a whole, and I mean, you've spoken to this in your own wisdom language, Catherine, about this I call it Polarity 2.0. And that sounds so grandiose and big, but actually all the astrology is showing us that the more simple we get, the more direct our way forward. It's like the upgrade or the up leveling is actually equally a down leveling, but it's actually both of them happen simultaneously when we learn to bridge the polarities, which is in the moment, the staying part that this wisdom axis is teaching us now. And these initiations of our darkness that I mentioned before, or meeting our initiations to make room for new choices. Aries is the sign of new engagements. It is the first sign of the zodiac. So it's what's new, brand new. It's like beginner's mind, literally, just the very, very beginning. And in order to get to the place where we can make these new choices that the Aries North Node is inviting us into next year, whatever we've composted now, and while the nodes are still in the Taurus Scorpio axis, will make room for new choices to emerge. Otherwise, we're likely to continue to make the same choices. It might seem new if we're making new choices, but unless we've really done the initiatory work of the composting and the staying and the allowing and the discovering our own inner resources as we do that, then the choices that we make seemingly new, it's like the expression, same shit, different day.
Okay, so I just want to summarize that, because that feels like the quintessential expression of what's available to us at this time. So we're completing, until July, we're basically completing these initiations through our darkness by choosing, by staying, by fully feeling what's arising for us, simultaneously acknowledging our enoughness in that, not needing to embellish or make grandiose or exaggerate or dramatize, but just simply the elegant simplicity of our experience simply as it is. And through that, the full spectrum actually opens.
Yeah.
Transitioning into basically a new cycle where we can make choices that are no longer informed by comfort or habitual habit patterns or karmic affinities, but potentially what we're drawn to by a more purified expression of our desire. Does that feel
excellent?
Accurate?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes, and I love that you brought in the desire, of course, because Pluto, which is a manifestation of our desire, in the chart will be squaring the nodal axis. As it transitions, it's going to be squaring it for a time. So that's a fulcrum point. So this is like
our desire is a fulcrum point.
Yes, it can be, and it can be like Pluto is also control. It's also, and it's at the very, very end of Capricorn, where it's been for, 15, 18 years. The numbers escape me right now, but before we can move forward into a new potential of our desire in Aquarius, we're asked to choose, what is our life force in service to? Is our life force in service to continuing modes of controlling, which are false senses of safety and security? Or are we willing to risk, because Uranus, the awakener, is in Taurus too, willing to risk the complete unknown, which is, and our fear, and maybe even some trauma around the body and what we still hold. So this is an amazing time. This whole period is working with trauma in the body to release these old patterns of conditioning that repress the shadow or that create shadow, and how the shadow and trauma work together to collude to keep us small. They're not actually working together, but our mind, our structures and our belief systems and our cultural conditioning accentuates this.
So hold on, I just want to pause right here and share. One of the gifts of astrology is not to take us into our minds to focus on what we need to make happen, but an invitation actually to relax deeper into the innateness of what is happening for us, through us.
Yeah.
If we just stay honest and available. So what you're saying about trauma and the body and all of that, it's not about creating tension and trying to employ a means of how to work that out.
Exactly.
It's a recognition that this is naturally arising and surfacing for us already. We just need to be available for it.
Exactly. And because it's Uranus with the North Node, which is trying something new, the more we can proactively engage heartfully and lovingly in addressing the traumas, finding the right people, such as you, people who are trauma, not just trauma aware, but embodied in transmuting old patterns and these habits themselves, who can, I love your expression, provide the handrail for others to do this in themselves, lovingly, supportively, in a way that's self-empowered.
Right. Not just our own bodies, but DNA collectively.
Yes.
Throughout. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And so, can you just speak briefly to how relationships may be changing in their influence or focus with this nodal shift?
Awesome. Wow. So that's a great question. Because again, all polarity has a relationship dynamic to it, but especially these two nodal axes, because they're ruled by the planets of relationship, the tantric planets, Venus and Mars. Relationship is undergoing great upheaval and transmutation of all kinds, right? We might find ourselves disillusioned with relationships. There might be, guaranteed, there's more projection outwardly of the shadow, and we don't want to do our own initiations into diving into the shadow, or allowing the shadow to teach us what is the gifts and the beauty and the additional life force that awaits us when we transmute the shadow. So especially relationships with debts, karmic debts, because not to get again too technical, but the certain stars that the South Node has passed through, very much about karmic balancing. So if we're finding that there's a lot of old stuff coming up that we didn't even know that we had, the propensity that we do as human beings is to the stories arise automatically, almost can't catch ourselves, right? But the more we can slow down, which is also a Taurus thing, slowing down, staying, finding a stability in whatever the experience is, it's going to accelerate the discomfort until we break through. And the breaking through isn't a doing, right? It's just the staying. So relationships, this is a period to discover or discern what relationships are worth. Interesting. Finding the common ground as the framework in which to hold the relationship. If the two partners, for example, or two people in relationship are consciously willing to do their work now. So it could be stabilizing in whatever the love is between them. That is the coherent factor, and the desire to come more fully into who they are. That is the stabilizing coherent factor in whatever the dynamic of the relationship is. And then whatever happens around that, they don't take it personally. They can find the grace in it, or that same polarity, that pulling apart, which this time is doing and accentuating for us, will just increase division and seeing the wrongs of the other and the shadow of the other, versus really, really taking that in and using that as the means for deeper self-knowledge, deeper self-wisdom.
Right. So essentially the model of tantric consort, or relationship as a crucible for relationship less as a means to offer comfort and security, but more as a means, ourselves whole and individuated to further be intimate with ourselves and in effect with another.
Exactly. And in that, yes. And in that way, we discover the freedom inherent in I can be me with you being you.
Oh, to say that again, that is such permission.
Yes, I can be me and you can be you. And there's an eroticism that can come from there's like a real the true desire to co-create, collaborate with another, then can come online in an organic way where it's not personalized. It's right. It's this, like you speak about that so beautifully all the time. Desire is not a person. It's not an object. It's not a thing we have to do. It is the expression of life itself through us. And none of us are going to get there overnight. This is a path. This is a journey. But the beautiful thing, grace of this time, and the thing that I am learning myself most profoundly is within all of this, finding my own pace, finding the wisdom of my own heart's timing. And that is, to me, the crux of where we find the balance of the inner polarity.
Oh, Andrea, it's so loving what you share. And it's such permission for the truth that there's nowhere that we're getting to other than where we are.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Okay, I know you speak so exquisitely about the feminine and the divine feminine as reflected in the skies and different planetary and asteroid influences. And I would love for you to speak a little bit more to how the feminine is presenting at this time, what's influencing that, how that's in relation to our own inner feminine and inner masculine, right? And how it might be different from how we've related to it up until now.
Wonderful. Oh, this is exciting. So to backtrack for a minute, this whole period of the Venus in the underworld meeting the sun farthest from Earth, and the recent Mars closest to Earth meeting with the moon opposite the sun. Again, this is a celestial dynamic that is also awakening in us of this polarity 2.0, of this Vesica Pisces potential, of what is the third thing that the masculine and feminine create together. And for me, two of the asteroid or dwarf planets actually that are at the forefront of this potential emboldening of where the masculine and feminine, it's harder to distinguish which one's which. So astronomically, Venus, the planet that I mentioned, is, the way I work with it, the significator in the chart of our feminine wiring by sign, house, and aspect. And then, of course, the phase that she was born in. I work with the phases, but she can only go because she's an inner planet. She's inside. She's closer to the sun than Earth. She can never get further than 48, 49 degrees from the sun. She can never have an opposition from the sun, which isn't a detriment to her. It's just that's how close she is. Venus is as Taurus, she's in our interior. The feminine is very interior at her most basic level because she's always looking to go back to source. But the asteroid goddesses and dwarf planets such as Juno, Pallas, Vesta, and Ceres, and Eris, which I'll get to in a minute, they are between Mars and Jupiter. They're in the asteroid belt. So because they are further out from Earth, further from the sun, they have the capacity to have an opposition, which is like a polarizing function. They can be 180 degrees. The Earth can be situated in between that planet and the sun.
And how does that affect our experience?
To me, that brings a new dynamic to the feminine, or it's not a new dynamic, it's always been there latent, but now this polarity 2.0 is awakening this. The feminine can go where she couldn't go before, is what this illustrates for me. Or the feminine, or that's not true. The feminine is always in her quality, in its quality, which is ineffable. The feminine is always the feminine. We can't do anything to it. Our consciousness as human beings is now being availed to an access of our feminine in ways that might not have been possible before for us to know as human beings.
So, hold on just a second. So in order for us to embody that experience, simultaneously, we're going to have to metabolize all the history of distortion.
Yes.
That we are holding around this, which I know so many people can relate to right now.
Beautiful. And this brings me to this beautiful thing that we shared, I was speaking to you a little bit about before, Ceres. Ceres, the largest dwarf planet in the asteroid belt. She is fascinating. They're still discovering her. She's active. She's not dormant. Some people even think that she's the remnant of a larger planet. So she's like the heart of a larger planet. But they've discovered underwater, she's got more salt water in her than I think the Earth does. And her top level is frozen, but it's instead, and there are these volcanoes on the surface of Ceres that instead of lava coming out through heat, this almost like this saline water is coming out of her. And Ceres in the myth, the way that I hold Ceres, one of her deepest initiatory capacities is to unfreeze stuck human emotion. And especially grief and the flowing grace that grief is and how it drops us into our hearts, how it opens up the doorway to vulnerability and deeper access to what we thought we have lost. So she's really about initiating us through loss.
Wow,
and the grief that comes.
So relate to that right now. And the deeper I go into grief, the more I access a warmth. An inner warmth that permeates my entire being. So beautiful how you share about the composition of her.
Isn't it? That's what I love about the astronomical reality, the geophysical reality meets. We stay so much in astrology. I love you brought this in too. We stay so much in astrology in our heads, and astrology is so much more. That is just, it's fascinating, it's interesting, it's cool, but the propensity to have us leave ourselves for information, for this constant hunger for more information, can leave us bereft of the actual transformative potential that the astrology is meant to awaken in us.
Yes.
Always, not just waiting for this particular transit to happen. Our natal charts are always available to us at any moment, right?
Yes.
So it's this Ceres is part of how she's the bridge between the personal planets and the social planets. She's the intrapsychic function that can, on the one hand, maintain this polarity between institutions and the individual, but she's also equally the bridging function of where does the individual's responsibility for our own evolution also have to include, or if it's organic and true, it will automatically, naturally include the social element. how are we meant to give our, it's not just about what are my gifts, oh, cool, I have all these, right? It's what are my gifts in service to? They're in service to building a culture, building a society, building a whole new, and it doesn't have to be so grandiose, like everything has to happen now overnight. Just because we have intimations of something or a vision of how things are, the reality is the cycles, the timing. It's all in due process. The 7 generations thing.
And in a sense, it's inevitable as long as we are available. And availability comes through staying. Yes.
And the Ceres and the asteroid belt planets, they help to depersonalize what's happening. If we allow it, if we allow that to work us in that way, the us versus them, the culture wars, and again, all these planets, Ceres has the dark side of that too. That is very much a dark manifestation of Ceres, is the freezing, the keeping the vulnerability, the tenderness of that deep well of ocean of life hidden.
Right.
Withholding or nurturing, that can be a Ceres thing too, to squeeze the funnel of our resources so that we have nobody else to rely on but institutions, governments, whatever, to give us our basic needs, to have our basic needs met. That is the shadow of it, and that's happening quite a bit now. We're seeing that in the outer world. But the more we own our own inner Ceres, wherever she is in our chart, what her relationships are with other aspects of our psyche in our chart, we can start to melt the frozen layer on the top and get to the deeper initiations that grief affords us.
Yes. So this has come up twice now, and I want to speak to it. In light of what you're bringing in terms of these new expressions of the feminine in our consciousness or experience of her, and the necessary metabolism of the old stories as we've held them or lived them out again and again and again. And I want to bring this topic up. It's a topic that I have in-depth experience with, both personally and working with people professionally for many, many years. And it's in connection to the Me Too movement. And the polarization between victimization of the feminine and the masculine in inappropriate violation or overtness of power. And it's been a necessary expression for there to be a level of exposure of that. For me, that feels like the surface level. And if we're willing and honest and available to penetrate deeper within us in the feminine, we can also begin to own our part of that dynamic.
Yes.
And that to me is where the true empowerment comes from, not from banding together with many other women who can relate to a similar victim story, but really, really claiming and feeling those places where maybe we checked out from our own vitality and invited ourselves to outsource something from outside of us, in all those ways. So anyway, I'm bringing this up right now because it feels very relative on a lot of levels. And I feel like we're at a real fulcrum point in a deeper empowerment with the feminine in how we navigate through, for me, empowerment is not necessarily through exposure and powering over in response, but a deeper felt honesty and responsibility to our own actualization of whatever our circumstances have been, or as you and I both know, really acknowledging what we're choosing.
Yes. Yes. And I'm glad you brought this up. And the thing that's so, I don't know why I'm sharing this in relation to this, but the willingness to be surprised around how our process shows up, and how much we're willing to lose control of managing, tracking the process.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's the release of the victimization to get, yeah. Yeah.
Andrea, I'll share this and then maybe you can speak to all of this astrologically a bit more. I have done so much work around this, this conversation. And recently I just discovered an even deeper layer of where I have utilized a certain deep level of resentment toward the masculine as an MO to rise above and excel in whatever it is that I'm doing. And when I discovered this within me, that this was such a subconscious MO to be and express who I was in the world, it was really confronting in terms of understanding where on my innermost levels I was still playing out the same story, that I wasn't on grosser levels, from past history, maybe that had looked more abusive in the past, but, on subtler and subtler levels. And it was when I finally could stay in the level of anger and acknowledgement of how I'm inviting that to me.
Yeah.
There was so much vitality and joy that returned to me in a way. And this joy has almost become impermeable by external circumstances, no matter how messed up or convoluted or whatever it is that they've seemed. So I guess this is more my personal share around what I feel is the opportunity with what you're articulating through the astrological influences right now.
Absolutely. And you're speaking to the innate polarity that happens, like as a response or a response to something, we tend to go the opposite direction until, like you say, you stay and you start to see the two polarities come together slowly, or you experience it. And it can be very uncomfortable because we don't know how to do that. We are so oriented to the either or dynamic, but you're staying and you're having your experience and being willing to see, wow, I'm doing this to me. It's like then the natural, more organic response of how you engage yourself in the world can arise. That same initial impulse of the masculine to move out now is sourced in a deeper resource of who you actually are, because that hindrance or that shadow element has now been composted into more of your life force.
Yes.
So isn't it, there's like nothing more satisfying and rewarding to be the agent of our own evolution, of our own empowerment. There's this quote by a lama, a high Tibetan lama that I just came across the other day that I absolutely love. And he says, I have it written down, kindness to oneself means undertaking the responsibility for one's own liberation. And that felt so, it was speaking directly to me.
Absolutely. It's for me, it's that constant reminder of what we're doing when no one's watching, how we are engaging with reality when no one is watching.
That is the true measure of whether we are initiate or we are a victim.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just arising right now. So this somehow feels relative to this axis shift between Libra and Aries. Libra is so relational, yes, that there's always this reference of other,
Yes.
possibly in motivation or whatever, whereas Aries is just that pure
Yes. Yes.
expression. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if we've done, to whatever extent we've done our work of untangling ourselves from these more hidden, manipulative and unhealthy entanglements, the Scorpio South Node can illustrate for us, and rest in, again, be sourced in ourselves more nakedly, honestly, what we're available for, what we're not available for. Perfect. Relying on our own inner stability and love as the only metric we need. Then when the axis moves, we have more choice to engage, again, not reactionally, not reactively against something, Libra, other, but we have freedom to make more choices with another or without another. And the extent to which we've depersonalized an experience and allowed more of the self-accountability with love, then the more it's like, are you with me? No? Okay, cool. Then I'll go on my own. It's if there's, it's like we start to magnetize to us the people that we want to be in relationship with. The dynamic of the South Node in Libra is, again, constantly deferring to other. It can be where we are trying to harmonize at our own expense. Aries, we're trying to just get everything back to some sort of level of stasis, which feels on one level good, but good is really just the metric of how our nervous system is regulated.
Well
so
said.
that's yeah, and especially we're talking about the South Node, so it's what we know, it's what we default to. Social conditioning, there's nothing more passive aggressive than a Libra.
Versus Aries, which is catapulting us into something new, which maybe felt as slightly uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. But it's like the freedom. Aries is so much about freedom too, and the freedom to make new mistakes. This is another beautiful quote. Not even a quote, and I'll make it very, very short. But essentially, the beautiful bard Stephen Jenkinson, who's worked in palliative care, he calls it the death trade for some time. He was speaking to the word awake and the etymology of the word awake. It's an old English language, an old English word, and essentially, very, very short paraphrasing, he speaks to the wake as what we create as we move through life. And that someone who is awake is not someone who's suddenly illuminated or someone who's come out of the dark or someone who's been asleep, but rather somebody who is available to tally up and stay with their regrets, the wake that they have made through life, to let it catch up with them, take ownership of it, love themselves is one way of looking at it, so that we can be free to make new mistakes.
New wakes. Wow, that's exquisite.
Yeah, but the thing that really struck me about that is when he said to be free to make new mistakes. That's the human element, the tenderness, the vulnerability piece that is so alive for us right now. Right. That is so, that Ceres can offer, that, well, anything can offer, but she's really part of this engine of bringing us back to the generosity that is literally generated from when we finally release our hold on the frozen layer of trauma, of avoiding the deeper grief that will initiate us into the deeper depths of who we are, to take accountability, to take responsibility for our role in whatever it is, not to assign blame, but just the love that's there, to discover the love that's there, so that we can then get it wrong all over again, have another opportunity to love ourselves, to forge deeper kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the availability to make new mistakes without making ourselves wrong in the process is what this period where the nodes are still in this Scorpio Taurus axis of where can I love myself in the darkness, in the depths, where can I find my inner stability and find where what I thought was shadow is just once transmuted more of my innate desire, my innate light force coming. I said light force, but life force coming online, same thing, right? Yeah.
And so the more individuated we are, there's more permission for both ourselves and for others to make mistakes.
Yeah.
For each of us to be self-responsible in our choices and in our engagement with what's happening.
Exactly. We move from the need to be special to the acknowledgement of our uniqueness. And then we acknowledge others' uniqueness as well. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, Andrea, there's so much here.
We could continue for a long time.
Wow. Well, we'll just do another one at some point. Is there any way that you want to wrap this all up through your astrological lens? I mean, what we've just arrived at and the presence and the transmission of love right here, like that is speaking to the embodied feminine. That simply is, and that's expressing as an invitation at this time.
Yes. The thing that I would say that the astrology is pointing to, especially, is again this simplify. The heart is the most intelligent organ beyond organ. The center of us is ultimately so intelligent, and yet it takes simplicity to enter the door. And it's the more simple and direct and basic we get. There's nothing more direct and basic than Aries.
Yeah, as Christ said, be like a child.
Be like a child. Exactly. That's it. And it's just like, no matter what, instead of getting carried away, especially if you're into astrology, the transits that are coming, the potentials, great. Enjoy the learning that you're getting from that. And the invitation to find your own pace. Get rid of any extraneous noise. The more we can consolidate and shore up our inner resources, allow ourselves to be surprised at what shows up within us and externally, move with it without moving out, we are going to be prepared then for the foundation will be set for new choices to arise in a more empowered way that are more coherent with who we are and more engaged dynamically and organically with the construction of the society that we want to see, that we want to be, drawing to us the partners, the people who are resonant with that. And so simplicity, slowing down to find our own pace. Gosh, it's taken me years to get to the threshold of that one. And just allowing, trusting, developing a faith in our initiations, and that we have the capacity, we are sourced within ourselves to have everything we need to find our way into the deeper levels of perhaps grief, perhaps rage, perhaps fear, whatever it might be, to take us there.
Oh. Andrea, thank you so much. For those of you that have not had an astrological reading with Andrea, it is profound. She's worked with me on my chart several times, and it's always an experience in the moment, And then the days following, there are ways that my life comes alive through the lens of her words and what's being activated in my body, where it's almost like a different dimension starts to engage. Her work is so powerful and she's so deeply embodied in it. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, so earnestly walking through her path. If you feel her at all, I really encourage you to check in the notes and check out her website. You also mentioned that you're doing more mentorship now. Do you want to say a word about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm discovering with clients that I'm getting more and more repeat clients that are like, I want to continue to work with you, either to learn astrology the way that you're teaching it or just to keep diving in. So it seemed appropriate to offer packages where for example, one woman, she's anticipating her next Saturn return. She wants to have a number of sessions that are working toward where we excavate gently, lovingly, the space of her Saturn and the dynamic, getting her into a fuller, richer relationship of her Saturn, so that the fear that's automatically generated through our nervous system around Saturn and what that means, she can find more spaciousness in that, more fluidity. So that's my heart's longing or passion, is to offer these kind of spaces of intention that we build and we meet and we form this like a limbic cauldron to really, really dive into certain aspects of our charts to awaken a more potent relationship from the inside out, not just through the astrology language, but through the experience that the container holds.
Yes, harnessing the full potential of transits in experience, through support and through a guide. Incredible. Beautiful. Any concluding words you want to say?
Just that I have so much pleasure being here with you and sharing, and just such a I am just very, very grateful to be here with you. And anyone who chooses to walk in their own way, it's not going to be like anyone else's. It's going to be different every day, maybe, but to really just show up, that's what brings me alive, and what I wish for everybody to feel, that deep desire and passion.
That's you. Thank you, Andrea. For me too, same. So much love in my heart, so much appreciation for your articulation and your depth of expression, and just joy that you're traveling in life near me too. Thank you so much for joining us. You'll find all Andrea's information below in the notes, and I look forward to seeing you next time.